Hello, Motorado World fans, and welcome to this episode of Talking TT. This time, we did Talking MotoGP last night. We've got Talking TT tonight with AJ Fenter, who I'll introduce in a second. And then tomorrow night, we continue the Talking MotoGP and TT with my good mate Greg Maloney, who was recently with me out at the Silverstone MotoGP, and he was our man on the ground at the Isle of Man TT. So we'll get all his input there. But as I said, I'm very, 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 very excited. Always great to chat to this guy. It's my once a year big conversation with him. AJ Fenter, our Isle of Man TT road racing superhero from South Africa. AJ, thank you so much for joining me again, taking the time out. I know you've been an extremely busy man. Northwest 200, Isle of Man TT, KJ Mognaniano Red Bull Rookies Cup, your son's short circuit racing, running a shop, being a loving husband to be. It's a lot going on, so I appreciate the time.
Yeah, how are you doing, Rob? Good evening. Good evening to all the Motor Rider World guys. And once again, thank you for having us on Motor Rider World. And before you get started, Rob, just a big thank you for all the coverage you guys do. This year's TT, once again, we had Sean on the go, you guys on the go. Thank you so much. And I'm excited. I can talk TT all night.
Yeah, I must take my hat off to both my brother Sean, who runs Motor Rider World now and all the social media. I know a lot of people still think it's me, but it's all my brother. He does all of that, and he introduced himself to some photographers, and he really got down, dug deep to get some really good contacts. We had Greg Maloney there on the ground. He made some fantastic contacts and fed us some awesome content as well from you and from some of the top TT names as well. So we really did, as Motor Rider World, I think we covered every single angle of the TT, and it was great having your input. Dom also always shares stuff with us, and we could always lean on her for some information. So it was a great team effort by everyone involved. So and to cap it off with a chat like this, it's always good. Craig Roberts, Sean is the man. Of course, Martinez Lawrence. Hello, boys. Now, Martinez was one of the crew members on AJ, one of the trusted crew members. He's also one of the few men that I would let work on my race bikes over the years. So great to have you, Martinez. Hope you're keeping well. Trisha Moorman. I mean, you cannot have a chat with AJ Fenter without having one of the Moormans joining. This time, I'm sure Trisha and the whole family are sitting there ready to talk TT. So big welcome to everyone. A big thank you to Powered by Autocycle Centre, who are supporting us at Motor Rider World, and they're sponsoring the TT coverage we had in the issue 54 of Motor Rider World. That's out now. Sean's just posted the link up there for you all to enjoy and to bring you this live coverage. So big thank you to Powered by Autocycle Centre, who are the official importers of HJC helmets, Spaniard, and Premier Braking there as well. Ludi Matobo, David Callahan, thank you so much for joining us. Sit back, make yourselves nice and comfortable. I'm in a nice, cozy, comfy spot here somewhere in the UK. I think I'm in Shakespeare Land in Warwickshire, ready for an event. So I'm ready to get talking TT. So AJ, again, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us. Before we went live, you were telling me how Tracy Lynn Fenter, now there's a name. Now there is a name. That lady's got a great, she was born on a proper day, the 9th of March. That's a good day. People that are born on that day are good. Welcome, Tracy. I haven't seen or spoken to you in a long time. I hope you're keeping well. Ronaldo Poltron, hello and welcome to you. But AJ, you were telling me how life is just very, very busy at the moment. It was literally Northwest, Isle of Man, Mugello, short circuit racing next week, and you have to deal with all these different weather conditions.
Yeah, Rob, it has been mental. And, while you were chatting, I'm smiling, looking at some of the comments. A lot of the guys that are on, or the people are, my mom, I haven't seen my mom since I got back. It's people I haven't seen for the last 2 months. So it's when I see them on there, I smile, And, it's been hectic. I went to the Northwest 200 the first week of last month. Of May, sorry. The first week of May, I left South Africa. We went across to the Northwest 200 where we raced that weekend. And then I had a weekend in between the Northwest and the TT. So I went last year as well. I went down to France to Paul Ricard. And a good friend of ours, Nathan, they run the Team Classic Suzuki. If you can remember when we ran the SATT and they brought Michael Dunlop out here. So I went with them to France, and I was spannering and working on the bike in a 4-hour endurance race. And then the following weekend, we drove France back to the UK, which it's about 1,500 Ks, loaded the van, drove across, and then obviously the TT our 2-week trip to the TT started. So I was there for 2 weekends, and then I came back from the TT, and I had 3 days back in South Africa. So from summer Northern Ireland to rainy Isle of Man to freezing Joburg for 3 days, and then I hopped on a plane and I flew to Mugello to the Red Bull Rookies, to the MotoGP, to help KJ. And we had also had a fantastic weekend. And I got back yesterday morning, 9 o'clock, and I'm back in the shop now. I got back about half an hour ago, busy prepping our short circuit bikes, because we need to go to Polokwane this weekend for the short circuit. My son's riding, and my partner Augustine, his daughter's riding. She's racing the short circuit, and then I think we've got a weekend off, and then it's off to Saxonring. So somewhere in between there, we're pushing Lacquer Racing. We got the shop going. My dad and Dom and everyone's carrying that fort. So it has been quite crazy.
That's good. Quickly, before we get into TT, tell us about magnificent Mugello. I've been lucky to be there back in 2022, but it was kind of, after Rossi had retired and COVID had hit. So there weren't as many fans. It was probably one of the lowest attendances that Mugello had ever had. But certainly this year, it looked like, it's even without the thousands and thousands of people there that year that I went, what a beautiful place to go race a motorcycle.
Look, the racetrack itself, it just creates good racing, and let me tell you, we were very fortunate where the Red Bull Rookies tent was at the exit of pit lane and on the verge of turn 1. Where they come in there, they're doing 300. Brad last year, I think, at 364 k's an hour. Yes. And funny enough, and you don't see it on TV, but at the end of that straight, there's a crest, and the bikes jump. And chatting to Brad, and we were just having that conversation, because you can actually hear the bikes go airborne and hit the electronics, and the back wheel speed on those bikes go to 400 k's an hour. And so in your head, you're riding this bike, it wants to rip your arms off down the straight. You're going through this long corner, back wheels in the air spinning, and you're doing 400 k's an hour. So for me, it was unbelievable. And when we watched the start of that sprint race, I think it was Alex Marquez, Mark Marquez, and I think it was Bagnaia, the three of them. And you see how close they're riding as they cross the end of pit lane like that. And in real life, we do stupid things. You and I both ridden motorbikes, but for me, that really, really is impressive to watch. So Mugello, the people, the crowd, the fans, the whole vibe, it's definitely a trip for people to go to.
Yeah, 100%. I would highly suggest Mugello. It is just a beautiful place to go watch. The weather's always really good. The atmosphere is fantastic. It's just, it really is a bucket list moment. So everyone in the comments, please, if you have any questions for AJ, let's get them going. Ask away. It's it's an open show. It's about everyone interacting, asking the questions that you would love to ask about the TT, about anything that AJ is involved with. As you can hear, it's quite a lot. So just get those questions in, and I'll try my best to keep up with the comments and ask those questions. So AJ, let's start with the big news, obviously that broke just before you headed off to TT, with your partnership with Future Exotics coming in and sponsoring you not only for this TT but a multiple year deal. How refreshing was that to, for the first time, I think, in your TT career, go into a TT with a bit more stability of financial backing? You had a better bike, you're more prepared than you've ever been before. How does that mentally help you setting up, knowing, right, all these pieces of the puzzle are in place before I even leave?
The biggest change from last year to this year was the Future Exotics sponsorship deal. And where we come from an era, and you can start from the preparation in a team to the having the team around you, to the marketing, to everything that goes into, and we made the step of prepping our own bike in South Africa. And this is now my 3rd year going to the TT, where we've managed to put something together. We've got a BMW here in South Africa. It's an all South African team. And we sort of go to the world's most dangerous capital, the road racing capital of the world. And let me tell you, last year was a very, very, very tough year for me. And basically, 2 weeks before we got to the TT, I had 2 sponsors lined up that had, unfortunately had to pull out due to the financial crisis in the world. And a lot of the racing people, and it's all friends and family that sort of chip in to help me go and make this happen. We had the fundraising with the go-karts. You guys drove a lot of it as well. So when the Future Exotics deal came about, it was literally, it put me back in the TT. When I came home from last year's TT, I said to Dom, you know what? We can't put ourselves through this every year. I'm 2 weeks away from work. It's stress on the family. You always come back in the red. People think you make money road racing. You don't, But the opportunity that we have to be there is something you got to take, as a South African, and having the privilege to go to the Isle of Man is something that I take in a stride. So when Future Exotics came on board, and I promise you, Rob, I felt like I'd won a TT, because the bikes were organized. The team, I could go to my team and I could say, guys, we have this opportunity thanks to Future Exotics. I can even help them get across, this whole, I had Martinez Lorenz, for example. Martinez is the kind of guy and Saki, they will just pay out of their own pocket just to come help me at the TT. For me, that was such a breath of fresh air. I could go to them, say, guys, we have this opportunity. We've got a fantastic sponsor. We can build the bike the way we want to do it, and we can run the job. And so that started from there. And then obviously we started putting the image together, the team, and their social media team taught me so much. I've been racing 25 years. Okay. This is I think it's my 7th or my 8th year going to the TT. And even now, I learned more this year working with the social media team from Future. The image of the pit. I don't know if you guys saw. We had a big pit, we had branding. So, and social media was very active. So what it did help me was last year, and we joked about it, but at the same time, there was a storm at the TT this year. And last year, we had a little 4x4 gazebo. Now we were in this awning that everybody was sitting drinking coffee under. And I can go out for the first night's practice, and I'm not thinking, guys, I don't know how we're going to pay the table. When I arrived at the TT, it's the first time I'd ever ridden the bike before I got there. So we could literally get on this bike and concentrate on riding. Yes. And for me, that was the biggest, I could, by the second night I'd come in, we knew where we were going. We could plug the laptop in. We could make the change. If Martinez and Saki, they would come and say, listen, AJ, let's put a tire in. I could go and I could buy a tire. Or, I had the right brake pads. We ran the SPS brake pads. I had the Motec stuff. Everything was new. So it just, and this goes back to, we were talking MotoGP, Rob. The racing in this day and age, if you don't have, it's not about being a rider. It's about having a package. And if you don't have that right package around you, it's never going to work. And for me, we got to a point where I was doing 126 mile an hour where I didn't think it was ever possible. Now we could come in, look at the data, and we're actually looking how to improve. And there's way to improve. There's margin to improve. So the Future Exotics thing, and I can tell you another breath of fresh air, and once again, a big thank you to them, is they've given me a 3-year deal. And that wasn't through my how can I say, my doing. When I sat down with Mr. Motti, the first thing he said to me, he said, AJ, I can sponsor you for a year, but things happen. You might have a bad year, you might have a puncture. Things happen that you don't feel like you fulfilled what you wanted to do. Yes. Let's do it over 3 years, and let's do it properly. So that when the 3 years is up, you can sit back and go, you know what, I gave it a good try. Yes, so, for he's not the top businessman he is, or he wouldn't be who he is now if he didn't know what he was doing. And that guidance he's sort of sharing that down into my racing career.
And it's priceless, like you said, to get that kind of input. We've all been lucky enough to have those kind of personalities and those people that have made, have made it out in life and been financially sound and grown big businesses. To take all that experience, I learned most of what I know in life through people that I met through racing. I left school to go race motorbikes. That's what I did. And you learn so much through the people you meet, and school of hard knocks and trial and error, but it is through the personalities like this that you meet and you really get to learn a lot from. So big thank you again to Future Exotics, the whole team. I love the social media. I think that was a part that was always maybe missing in past years with you. It was great that you were going, but you weren't exposing as much yourself to the sponsors as it could be, because of your limited resources. And
Yes.
you would have to take a huge social media team and pay Greg a lot of money to send him over, but your hands were always tied. So it was great that they backed it up with not just, hey, AJ, go there with a bike sprayed with our logo on, and then let's hope for the best. They backed it up with, this is what we're also doing. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought you exposed a different side to the TT and your TT with the behind the scenes stuff and that we've never seen before.
Rob, something else that for me was really unique was the amount of South Africans that came to the yeah. And what was cool as well is, and don't get me wrong, they reckon the highest population of non-Manx people is the South African. So the South African population of the Isle of Man is strong. But we had a lot of local South Africans, and we had South Africans from home.
Yeah.
And we met, and I've always been like that, because when you used to race nationals at Kyle Army, I was the little snot picker riding a bicycle there, wanting to, see you guys, and so when I see the kids, our pit's open to anybody. If you want a cup of coffee, come have a cup of coffee. And we met, and I got so many messages from parents saying, thank you for allowing the kid to sit on the motorbike for a photo. And for us, it's nothing, but it's the whole world to their kid. And and that made me also appreciate how much social media actually does, because you're meeting all these people and they say, well, how long have you been here? They've lived on the island for 5 years. I've been coming here for the last 8 years, and they didn't know I was there. And now all of a sudden and some days it sounds mad, but I've never experienced this, where you've got that many people at the pit. You just want 5 minutes to go and have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that was, stem that back down. It's social media. It's covering on Facebook. People are seeing, hey guys, we've got a South African riding. We need to support them. We had some families on the Isle of Man. They brought us biryani. They made us milk tart. We got given biltong. We got Milo, just to make us feel welcome to the island. And it's funny, because obviously my results haven't been as better like they were this year, but in previous years, for whatever reason, we've never had that opportunity. I say, AJ, is this your first year or your second year? And you sort of humbly want to tell them it's your seventh. We've got a fantastic setup thanks to Future Exotics. So the social media image really made an important impact on the TT.
Yeah, it's become a big part of the game. It's exposing what you're doing there to the broader audience, because not everyone notices or takes note of what's happening there. So yeah, it was a fantastic job, and well done to everyone involved at Future Exotics, yourselves, the whole social media team, every single person. It really was brilliant having that kind of representation for South Africa at the TT, because it's always been great that you've been there, but it's hard for someone like me to look at it and go, it's great that you're there, but I know at what level you're there at, and it's like, so this was brilliant. I'm going to get to the first question from Ludi Mabotha. I hope I'm saying that right. What was AJ's highlight of the TT?
I think the highlight for me was, we set our best lap again. Okay. And the difficult thing with the TT is to explain the average mile an hour to the average person. If you can't go there and win a TT, okay? But you got to set, and how your lap time works, because it's a 67, in the South African terms, it's a 67 kilometer lap, 37 miles. Yeah. It takes you anything from 17 minutes to 20 minutes, and then they give you an average speed. So my top speed this year, in relation to last year I did 291 or 289, 290 was my top speed. This year we did 307 kilometers an hour. But it gives you your time at an average of. Yes. So my personal best was 126.2 last year. And that was in the senior race, perfect conditions, and we'd had 2 weeks of hard work. By our super stock race, we'd already got to this 126 mile an hour. And for me, I was proud, because, we're the fastest South African to lap the TT course, and there's been a few people riding there. And what was so nice to do was, because we had the resources and we were a lot more prepped this year, we managed to get there early or earlier, and it allowed us more time to improve it going into the second Superstock race and the senior, And unfortunately the senior was cancelled, but we definitely had an ace card up our sleeve to make another step. So for me, that it's always proud when you get the results, because you've been given an opportunity by a sponsor in Future Exotics, and you need to show them that their input has helped. It's made an impact, and setting that personal best has made an impact. That for me was a proud moment, and just repeating the South African people coming there, I promise you, it was such a cool vibe. It makes you proudly South African. We've got a lot of things happening in this country, and if you look at what's happened in the last 2 weeks in the rest of the world, it's everywhere. And to have everyone stand there, it is a cool thing.
And I think even to highlight that point even more is that you were able to improve in what was a very disruptive TT. You didn't have the conditions and the weather you have in previous years. It was on, then it was off. There was damp patches. It was limited time, and so to be able to pull off what you did, like you said, it's a pity we didn't have the senior TT because you potentially had this ace up your sleeve. But to be able to go faster in what was one of the more interrupted TTs just kind of shows you the progress you were able to make because of the support of sponsors, fans, and everyone out there.
Sorry, Rob, one other thing. You're talking about the conditions. We worked out the laps. We normally do an average of 35 to 40 laps in practice week when the weather's. And I think this year we were lucky if we got maybe 15 to 18 laps. That was just, and I mean, we had one night's practice on the big bike, and I remember I went out over the mountain, and as I was coming up the mountain, you could literally see the fog coming in, and I thought, I'll do another lap, and I tried to do the second lap, and I came onto the mountain, and there was yellow flags, and what had happened was the fog had come in so thick that you couldn't see 10 meters in front of you, so they put yellow flags out, and everybody had to just go back under caution. And I felt sorry for the newcomers, because every bit of track time you can get is so crucial to be riding. And you also think about the marshals standing in the absolute freezing weather, but that was those were cancelled laps that shortened our practice week, So we're very, very motivated for next year. It's also made me realize that I always thought 125 was like the limit for me. And if I did 125, I was done, and we're going to get married and go to Paris, But you know what? This year also opened my eyes a little bit now that we can, as South Africans, we're not doing anything different to the rest of the world. We can match those guys, and we'll get there. Next year we'll make that next step.
So the 68 Samurai, which is Ronald Slummett, our good friend who raced with us at Nationals and that as well, says, AJ, don't chat too late. You need to pick me up at the airport at 4 a.m.
No, that's not Ronald. It's Nico Jonk. Nico Jonk.
I mean, the 68 Samurai.
Yeah, he's also he's a 68 Samurai. Nico. He's flying in from Jeddah. He actually helped me at the TT this year.
Oh, nice.
And, he was over there as well, and he was there, and he gave us a bit of a hand in the pits and that.
Oh, nice.
And he's landing at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I offered to fetch him from the airport. So that's also on my diary. I'll fetch him tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock, go drop him, and get back and get the kids to school.
Craig Hicks wants to know, were you also offered Mampur by all the South African supporters?
Do you know what? We didn't, but we had a lot of the Irish there, and the Irish did all the drinking. They come with they have a drink they called pochine, but it's like an Irish Mampur.
Okay.
And we had a few years ago, we did give them a bottle, and it did humble them a little bit.
Craig Hicks also asks, should they have moved the senior TT to the Sunday?
You know what, Rob? And believe it or not, the weather on Sunday was fantastic. The sun came out beautiful. It was unbelievable. The problem they have, is the marshals around the TT course are voluntary, and they need about 1,000 marshals to make the event happen. And that was the one problem. So they had no marshals for Sunday to move the day further. They didn't have enough marshals to make the day happen. And then the other problem, they had a contingency when it comes to the road closures. And that's what the difficult thing with the TT is. It's still a public road. So they get given let's say from 10 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon for a road closure. And then from there, you have, they'll open it for the schools so that people can get home from work or collect their kids from school, and then the roads would close again. So if they moved the senior from the Saturday to the Sunday, the road closures were in place, but it disrupted. They had no marshals. And then the other thing that was a problem, and it was already a build-up in the week, was the ferry, people getting off the island. So a lot of the sidecar teams had been booked on ferries that had been delayed. And that snowballs on through the rest of the week. So some of the riders are booked on to go home the Saturday night, some of the teams, because they had Snetterton BSB was the following weekend. So like for me, I want to say disappointed we didn't do the senior because the weather was not good. Okay, yes, the wind was horrible. What motivated me about doing the senior was we were given an inspection lap just before the race, and it gave the riders an opportunity to go out, do a lap, have a look and see what you think, and make a decision when you come in. And unbeknown to me, I didn't know that a few guys had said no. I'd come in and we'd made a very, very big change to the bike that we wanted to take a gamble on for the senior. And this allowed us to, if it didn't work, go back. And I'd been struggling with a handling issue on the bike the whole 2 weeks. And this fixed that issue. And when I came in, I was really, really happy with the motorbike. So I wanted to ride the senior, but I also, like I said to when they asked my opinion, I wasn't doing 130 mile an hour lap. So it might affect someone else slightly different. So I didn't want to jeopardize that and be the hero saying I'll ride and, Davey Todd doesn't want to ride. But at the same time, I've traveled halfway across the world, and my whole year, but my whole life evolves around coming to this TT. So I'm here. I've bought my tires. I've bought my fuel. I want to go race motorbike. So it was a bit of a disappointment for me, but I also respect the official's decision, because if you listen, Gary Thompson, who runs the Isle of Man, and he's the clock of the course, he has the toughest job you've ever seen, because he's got to make that decision. If whether the track's safe or not, whether the weather's coming in from he speaks to the Met Office. Is the fog coming in? Is the rain coming in? How we for time, road closures? And unfortunately, the nature of the Isle of Man, a crash there doesn't end well. And should a condition affect anything to do with the course, things can go wrong, and it can always filters itself back to go, but you guys wanted to ride, and maybe you should have listened to our decision, and I'll always give Gary the praise. We had nights cancelled, people get upset, but I respect his decision, because someone has to make that call, and what the job he's doing is definitely working. This is the second year in a row that we've had no fatalities at the Isle of Man. That's something that hasn't happened in years, as far as I know, so I think if something had to have gone wrong in that senior race, without tempting it, I think the first thing people would have gone and said, guys, but we advise you not to ride with the weather.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So for me, yes, it was a frustration, but at the same time, it's a very, very tricky area that they've got to deal with.
Yeah, he's got a lot of balls to juggle, and I don't mean that in the as I said that it sounded wrong, but yeah, he's got a lot of hard decisions to make, Gary Thompson. There's no doubt about that. And I think he made the right one. As you said, even on a good day, the TT is not a safe place to be. So if there's any kind of spanner in the works, they've really got to take it seriously. So as frustrating as it is for riders, teams, fans, us in South Africa, at the end of the day, the safety of everyone involved is, and like I said, protect the ecosystem that is the Isle of Man. You can't just set aside the normal living life there because you want to go race your motorbike. You've got to respect the island and the TT for what it is. So right decision made, and let's hope that next year is bigger and better. Lisa Esmond, hi again, Rob. Huge respect to you, AJ. We were at the TT a few years ago. The speed you guys are doing on those narrow roads is sublime. I'm amazed you don't get tunnel vision. So well done to you. And then a question here from Aiden Westhuizen. Another good mate to you who's done some racing in South Africa, Aiden Westhuizen. After 7-8 years going to the TT, what is your favorite section, and what's the most difficult section for you?
So the best part for me, I want to say the bottom of Bray Hill, and I enjoy I enjoy it more and more. And the reason why I enjoy Bray Hill is because it's so early in the lap. And what happens is you go off the start line. The first thing you do is you're hitting top gear. You're going flat. It feels like you're going off the end of a cliff, and then you turn and it bottoms out and you get a big wheelie at the bottom. And it reminds you why you're doing this. It reminds you why we're at the TT, and then you go over Agos, you get a big jump. And if you time it right off the start, when you exit Quarter Bridge, you can see the next person in front of you that went off 10 seconds in front. And that already, if you see him, it means you've stolen 2 seconds, And 2 seconds around 37 miles isn't a lot. But when you see someone, that carrot's there, So for me, the bottom of Bray Hill is always a fantastic place. And what was the other question?
The hardest section.
And I think the hardest section is definitely under the trees. You'll run a section from like the Glen. So sector 1 is your Glen Helen section, which is it's a very fast, very flowing section. Okay. And to give the listeners an idea, if we drive it in a car, I jump in the van and I take people around and we go for a chat. And we do the normal speeds, and it's 50 mile an hour that you can drive which is about, 80, 90 Ks an hour.
Yes.
It takes us 25 to 30 minutes to get to the end of Glen Helen, which is sector 1. Okay, there's no stop streets, there's no robots, it's just a straightforward flowing section. We're doing that in 4.5 minutes.
Yes.
And what makes it trickier, and it sounds mad now, is when you ride the smaller bikes, you've got to, a lot of those corners become flat. But they're only flat if you're on the right piece of the road at the right time, because what will happen is it's all about your momentum.
Yes.
You end up rolling that throttle, let's say, from 100% to 70% when you could have gone through there at 90%. Yes. You now need to try and make that up going there. So a very tricky section for me is Glen Helen's tricky, but from Kronkavadi straight to Billa Bridge, that's always seemed to be my weaker sector. And what we've nailed it down to is I don't ride on the road. Yeah. I never grew up on the road. And that's a very road racing section. It's got jumps, it's got holes, it's got fast-speed turns. So this year we seem to have made the biggest gain in our package across all the bikes in the area. And it takes time. It takes time to chip away.
A big thank you to TH Racing as well, they made a comment here, but also a big thank you to them for having you, giving you the opportunity to ride the twin and the super sport, to gain more experience, more exposure, more laps, to be able to, take that knowledge and put it onto the superbike. So a big thank you to them for always, providing a package for you to go do some laps. And we'll talk about them and your time on those twins a little bit later as well. The question I want to get to you, AJ, is, you were obviously, as you said, you built your own BMW last year. It was well publicized. You got support. You got this new BMW. It was a new BMW, but the older shape, I believe. But you had this new BMW. You went to the TT, fully prepped in South Africa. You were still fine-tuning it. And. Tell me about that you went to with this year. Was it the same bike? Because I see you were running the M1000RR Aero package. It's a lot bigger and broader. It's the same one, top rack, and them using World Superbikes. How did that perform at the TT, having the bigger wings, and how was the aero? So talk to me a little bit about the bike and the changes that you made with the extra support in budget and everything to be able to improve at this year's TT.
So yes, and believe it or not, the reason we went with a 2024 S1000RR was, being in South Africa, we're a long way from Europe. And at the time we needed a 2025, they weren't available. So I made the call to go the safer option. Let's get the same bike we rode last year. Because realistically for me, if Peter Hickman can do 135 mile an hour 2-3 years ago, if I'm on a 2025 S1000RR, I don't believe I'm going to go from 125 to 135 mile an hour. When I feel like I'm at the peak of what this bike can provide, then we'll start pushing at maybe looking at an M1000RR or maybe a super bike. Remember we're riding a super stock bike, and you get a super bike there, which makes 235 horsepower. So the safer option was to go the 24. We bought a brand new bike. One of the issues we had over the past few years was we never had the finances to buy a bike. So the first bike I borrowed, and the second bike I borrowed, and I literally lent them from friends who gave me this motorbike, built it into a race bike, and we took the TT. And last year, one of our hiccups we had was we'd managed to get a Motec system, all your fueling and your wiring harness and everything. And because we got it secondhand, it had come from a previous owner who'd crashed the bike and there was damage in the harness. And the problem with all of these was we'd get to the TT and you've got limited track time.
Yes.
And what was happening last year was I'd go out and the bike wouldn't rev and I'd lose that lap and I'd come in. Then I'd lose a night's practice. And you're losing development, you're losing setup. Okay. And B, there's a rule on the Isle of Man for insurance that each bike must have completed 3 laps to qualify. Okay. And whatever speed. And then you obviously need to still put a qualifying lap in to put you on the grid. So every night's a qualifying night. Now you've got cancelled nights with the rain. You've got half-run nights that might have damp track or there's wet corners. So you're not going to get that ideal setup. And then you've got a bike breaking down at the same time. I then had the same problem where we've got nowhere. I run a bike shop in South Africa. I run Lekker Racing. And if I have any issues with my bike, I can put it on my dyno. And I have my dad plugs the laptop in and he can 910% he'll fix that issue. We're now stuck on the Isle of Man. We're in a 4x4 gazebo tent. And we got access to a dyno that I must pay £40 every time I need to do a run. So I didn't have the money for it, This year, when this all came about, it allowed us to buy a new motorbike, build it the way we wanted to build it, and I'll get to why we went the fairing, the M body kit. And but our wiring, we bought new wiring harnesses, we bought new Motec systems, so that basically Future Exotics gave me the option to say, AJ, what do you want to put on this bike?
Yes.
And then build it. So that when I got on the bike, I had peace of mind. We didn't have broken bolts. We didn't, everything, we could get on that bike and go. It allowed, because we had the bike built earlier, it allowed my dad and Saki to sit and spend time on the dyno and develop. They worked with Neil from Powersport with a rotor and they developed a pipe. We built our own pipe to make it work. My dad sat and Saki, they did understand the Motec software so we could get that to work. We took it to Red Star and we could test that the logging systems were working. And we had 1 or 2 small issues, a battery. A battery was a very, very, very tricky thing for us 2 years ago where I didn't have the funds to buy the correct battery for the bike. And we came in for a pit stop in the race and I ended up doing a 1.5 minute pit stop. And I went from, you've ridden so hard to get up to like 18th and you dropped to 42nd because the bike won't start. And I've got Saki and my dad and them trying to push this bike down pit lane. This year we bought the correct battery. And by buying the correct battery, I had the exact same team that helped me push start that bike. We went pit lane this year and they had the 3rd fastest pit stop out of everyone. Your FHO, and that just shows that our team is capable of doing what we can do. So back to the fairing, we opted to go the M kit because the problem with the TT is you're sitting at an average of 125 mile an hour, you're doing 230 k's an hour and your neck takes a hammering, your shoulders take a hammering. This just allowed me to be able to tuck in a bit more. Yeah. Okay. It hides you away from the wind a little bit better. You've got a slightly higher screen. And it obviously gave us a little bit more top speed in the end because your aerodynamics package is better. So given the time we got and the opportunity, we were allowed to carry all our ideas we've had in the last 2 years of things we wanted to do, to put it all in place and put it together. And it showed. It really, really showed. And like I say, I'm sad we didn't get the senior. In the last Superstock race, I did 126.9 mile an hour lap. I missed 127 by half a second.
Jeez.
And it was my own fault. 100% my own fault. And I caught someone and I was so, at the start of the race, I went off and I was trying too hard. And we went through the data and basically I struggle to get going with a lot of these laps. And where we seem to achieve more is in the longer laps, your 4 lappers or your 6 lappers. Okay, because a lot of the riders are very fast on the first lap. And what tends to happen is by lap 2, you get tired. And listen, we all get tired. The nature of the Isle of Man, it's physically tiring. Your knees go, your elbows go, your head. So by lap 3, people start to, push a bit of air, and we normally do a lot more damage. And with the weather this year, they shortened a lot of the races. So with the Superstock race, we came to the conclusion that we needed to put the hammer down at the gate, put the head and push. And I feel like I was over pushing because I was going through the Glen Helen section, and it was literally throwing me. It was high-siding me out the seat all the time. And I couldn't understand why it kept throwing me out the seat, and I was getting frustrated. And the problem with the Isle of Man is you can't get frustrated, because when you get frustrated, you make mistakes. And, it can just snowball.
Yeah.
Then I came onto Kronkavodi Straight, and it was your first sort of resting place. And I had the biggest murky you've ever seen hit my visor. So then I went for my tear-offs. I pulled all my tear-offs off. So I had 4 more laps to do with no tear-offs. I was so frustrated when I was riding. I finished the lap, but on our dash, we've got an onboard Delta, a lap timer, and that can show me it either goes green or it goes red. Okay, a lot of the BM guys will be able to, and when you see that's green, you're on it, and it just keeps you chasing that green light. And my Delta was showing me I was 6 seconds up, and I came into Ramsey Happen, and I turned around to have a quick look behind me, and I saw I'd been caught by Mitch Rees, the newcomer. And when I saw Mitch catch me, it really frustrated me, because I'd beaten him in the previous 2 races by miles. So I'd obviously, being frustrated, I felt like I'd gone backwards. So anyway, I tried to break him over the mountain, and he passed me coming out of the creek. And once he passed me, we came into the pits, and I was so mad because I was just agitated. I missed the pit limiter button. So they hit me 6 seconds for speeding. So I went off at 25. I came in at 18, and I missed the pit limiter button, but not realizing that I'd missed it, because in your head, it happens so quickly. You've got to turn the limiter on and hold the throttle open, and I'm watching for where Martinez is. So they hit me 30 seconds on the clock so drop me back down to 48 or something. And when we came out the pits, I came out before Mitch, and I saw next to him, and I thought, you know what? He's obviously quicker than me. Let him go, and he can pull me. Yes. So he went, and he pulled about 8 or 9 seconds on me at the start. And by the end of the last lap, I caught him, because then I managed to just calm down and got this flow. So I caught Mitch coming over the mountain, and I thought, you know what? I've already ruined the race in a way. I'll just follow him to the grandstand. And I literally sat behind him, past the Craig, Cronkimona. Then I come in and I see I missed 127.5 a second.
Oh, God. And it was right there.
And I was mad, because I can give you one of 300 places I could have found that half a second. So the senior was a chance to show.
Wrongs, yeah.
We sat down afterwards, and we had a regroup with the team, and we went through the data. And to give you an example, and this is once again having the opportunity to have this package. My ideal last year, when I left the Isle of Man, I did 126.2 with an ideal of 128. So we knew it was achievable. My ideal this year was just short of 130 mile an hour. So in my head, I can do 130 mile an hour lap. The problem, and I'm sure it's a problem that everybody has, right? That's the nature of the TT course. You've got to string that lap together. It's 37 miles of everything that can get thrown at you at 300 k's an hour. You've just got to get that package together. So we've left the Isle of Man in a very positive position.
Yes.
We're still going to improve on everything we've done to go next year, and we're just going to keep chasing,
So a couple of people are asking here, Trisha Millman, Dion Nelson, in terms of the bike, with the contract that you've got, knowing what you've come out with after this TT, as you said, chasing more, going with that bike option, is the plan for now, or is it still too early days to say, but is the plan for now to stick with the current package you have? Or, Fireblade looked like it was quite good at TT this year. The new Fireblade is, what's the plan in terms of bike for the next 2 years?
The Fireblade is a good bike. Why we went the BM route is we've got no support from a manufacturer. Okay, we sat in a position where we could buy a BM, we could buy a Honda, we could buy a Suzuki. Because we'd ridden the BM 2 or 3 years, we had a lot of setup, and we've got a lot of information we've gathered. And our team around us, between my dad, everybody knows, we've got the very fortunate to have Saki, Saki from BMW. If anybody knows a BM, Saki knows that BM, and he gives me his time for 2 weeks in a year to come and give that knowledge, and my dad with the Motec stuff. And the reality is, with the TT course, it's about top end. You need a bike that runs at the top, and you need a bike that's got a bit of mid-range. A BM comes out the box and it makes 200 horsepower on my dyno. Give or take, all the dynos are different.
Yes.
If I needed to, and I mean, you've seen, I had my Suzuki, I've ridden an R1, and they're all good motorbikes. To give you an example of the R1 round Red Star is a very good motorbike. Mm-hmm. Okay, the R1 round the TT course, I think, might struggle because of the nature of the bike. So if I needed to get my R1 to make the power the BM made, I'd have to start modifying it. The problem you have is we're riding in the superstar class where we're not allowed to modify it. And when you start to modify, obviously reliability becomes the issue. So the safer route for us was to go the BMW. Yeah. And I know if you look at all the feedback and the setup we have, we've enjoyed it, and it has worked for us. So going next year, we have, whether we're going to keep this bike is still a meeting that needs to take place. That I need to go back now and sit with the team and with the sponsors and the powers that be, and we make a decision, because this bike was brand new. And I don't feel that this bike's limiting me in any way. However, it does help going with a new package, because we proved that this year you have no reliability issues. So it's a catch-22. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this motorbike when it gets here, but it's because we went there with a new bike.
Yeah, I agree with you. Looking at it in your position, the difference between a 23 model and 24 model BMW S1000R versus a new one, with what you're doing it at the TT, with all the data and everything that you have, for you, I can understand the difference between a Todd and a full factory superbike guy who's getting a bike given to him. That's a different story. But for you to now go sell that bike, fork out more money to go get a brand new bike, start from scratch again, I think the best thing you can do over these next 3 years is keep that momentum going and not change too many things to find yourself going to the island. And you've built up this piece of paper now. You don't want to go there and start with a blank piece of paper again. So I agree. I think looking at the bike, now with the data and everything that you've learned from it, there's a good 130 mile an hour bike there. So
I've got this thing chewing at me, and I've got it. That's what's chewing me here. And then on this side, on my phone, I have all my mechanics chewing me. Wow, we didn't do 128 this year. Because everybody, we can see it on the data. We can see what was there. So I don't feel like I'm on the limit of that bike. So it's not that I want to take that specific. We can literally take that bike, bolt everything in, go back to the TT. We're gonna go faster. So for me, I've got no reason not to ride a 2023, 24 BMW. However, if you ride a 25 or you ride we go to an M, it might give us a little bit more power at the top, and we might score a little bit here and there. But I've got no issue with the package we put together. And I think the main reason behind it, Rob, is we built that package to what we wanted. Yes. So we know where we stand. We know what we're working with. Saki's got those wheel changes dialed in. Do you know what I mean? For he's practiced his German on those BMWs, because 2 years ago I came in for my first pit stop. We didn't have what you call a captive spacer. So what happens is the wheel spacers, they don't fall out. And I remember coming into the first pit stop in the senior, I heard the knocker gun, they did my visor, and I heard the spacers fall on the floor. And it was an extra 10 seconds on our pit stop. And I couldn't be upset, because it's the nature of the TT. However, we've never made that mistake again. We now have the right wheel changes. And I know I mentioned it already, but my O's put the pit stop in. Third fastest pit stop. We were faster than 810 Racing. We were quicker than them. That's a proper factory team. And this is proudly South African people that have all come together and gone to the TT. We've gone road racing,
Lourdre Spanner from the Berg. You just can't beat him. Martinez Lawrence Boxberg, I love it. I love it. AJ, before I get to another question, something that I thought of watching the TT, and forgive me, I've never been that into the TT because I just can't connect with it because of what you guys do. I just see it as complete madness. So I struggle to superbike racing and MotoGP I can connect to because I know where you're going and you kind of know what's coming. The TT just, every time I watch it, I just picture a cat or a dog running out there, and I cock myself. I really do. But in MotoGP, we hear about Ducati, all of these guys. The teams, manufacturers sharing data. Now, from the TT side, you're running a BMW there. Yeah, okay, slightly different, maybe in terms of Davy Todd's or Hickman's or whatever. But do you have the opportunity to go to a Davy Todd? I mean, most of the guys now, and say, right, can I have your data and see what you're doing where, gearing wise, to kind of compare yours, to help yours? Is it an open kind of character book like that? Or
the road racing is very open, and that's what sucked me into road racing in the beginning, and it's actually quite a funny thing. Take nothing away from MotoGP. For me at the minute, because I've had the best of both, where I'm fortunate to go and help KJ, so I work in that MotoGP paddock, and then I end up in the road racing paddock. The MotoGP is very barrier taped and it's very restricted, and there's a lot of money at stake. It's probably 10 times the amount of money at stake in a Grand Prix versus the Ironman TT. But the road racing people are all under the same impression. You're there, and one lie can actually affect someone's life, And BMW, Alpha Racing, they send over a couple of technicians that in the paddock. So we had a guy come over, and he sat and he worked one-on-one with my dad and Saki, and they went through data. And every session he could come in, look at the data and say, right, change this, change that, and learn. Okay. Then we had one issue that we were battling with. I was getting, it sounds mad, this at 38 degrees lean angle at 237 k's an hour, I was getting wheel spin, and we couldn't understand what it was doing. And we walked up to Phil Crow, who runs Crow Performance, and Crow races. He's got all his superbikes, everything. And I felt so bad walking in there because he'd just blown an engine, and he was busy tying the head down. And I said, Crow, I'm sorry to disturb you, but is it possible for you to just run through something on my data? He literally put his tools down. He sat there for 10 minutes, and him and my dad went through data. He'll give me his fuel map. He'll give me anything I want. And when I was there 2 years ago, we had the wrong sprocket. I walked out to Johnny Burrows, who runs the Burrows engineering team. I rode for John, and I asked him, but he lent me a sprocket with pleasure. He'll tell me Connor Cummins is running this gearing. Michael Dunlop, I needed a spare sprocket carrier to speed our wheel changes up, and we didn't have one here. So same thing, I popped into Michael's awning, and obviously I built a relationship with Michael when he came over here to the TT, and he's running some proper pieces of kit. Like he's got the Lamborghini of BMW, but he didn't have that sprocket hub. He literally picked the phone up. He phoned someone in Northern Ireland, and he got it brought over on a boat. So the road racing, you'll have a look. If some of the careful guys see the photos, my exhaust changed throughout TT, and what had happened was the rivets on the top of the exhaust from the heat had come out, so it blew the packing out.
Okay.
They just gave me another part to try. So it's a very, very open. When we were on the dyno, we had to go and stretch. We put a new chain on the bike, and to stretch the chain, we went up to Frank Rathels, put it on the dyno, and you give it a run. And he's willing to show you what the other guy, and he'll tell you, guys, your bike's making good enough power, you there or thereabout. So it is a lot more of a friendly. I'm pretty sure. I mean, Michael's not going to share his info with Hickman, and I think there's going to be that rivalry, but. From my experience, everyone that we've dealt with, it's a very, very open paddock.
But AJ, if I look at the track racing side, if I was battling a bit, I'd go to a Chez or someone, and there would be those little clicks or something here that you could feel would help the package. Have you physically gone to Michael or whoever and said, right, can we literally my data, your data, and see what we're doing? Or, I'm running 12 clicks of preload on the front, and I feel like this. What preload are you running? How detailed can you go with Michael or someone and compare data and actually physically try it on yours?
So with Michael, he will answer anything I ask him. Honestly, and I'll give him that. I always laugh when I see him, because I watched an interview with him the one day, and he says he's like Marmite. Either you like him or you don't. And Rob is a good guy. He's a really, when you sit and spend 5 minutes with him, he's if you understand what he's doing and his job at hand, he's I promise you now, he's a very, very, very clever person, and he wouldn't have achieved what he has if he wasn't. But someone I do work very closely with at the TT, which shortcuts me going to the riders, there's a guy that owns a company called Motorshocks, and he's the K-Tech agent in Northern Ireland and that, Mark Arnie. And I've known him for a couple of years. And Arnie comes and he literally sits and goes through my data, and he can give me, and that was the change we made prior to the senior, because I can go to him, and we used to doing our own stuff, and us as South Africans can be stubborn. I like the challenge, and I'll work with my guys. So I won't doubt my mechanics. If we all sit around the corner and say, guys, we're stuck, we go and look for help. If not, we just pursue, and Arnie comes to our awning and he sits, and I can run an idea past him and say, I'm going in this direction. Is it right? And if it's wrong, he's going to say, AJ, we went this way. Okay. Came the senior, he went to me, says to me, we're running. So I ran my bike on the dyno. It was 1 horsepower down on Connor Cummins' stocker. Okay. He literally, we were running 99% the same geometry. And I wanted to make a change I was going to change the swing arm angle on the bike for the senior. And you know me, I like to fiddle. And he came to say, AJ, don't do it now. Go to the track and go and test it. He could have easily kept quiet and said, we'll try it and see what it thinks. So he's been a very, very big role in my road racing stuff, because when I get to the TT, if you go to Red Star, it doesn't matter what bike you're riding, but I'll tell you what geometry to run, what gearing to run. Whereas at the TT course, you got to talk to the powers that be, And Michael, I mean, I've got gearing from him before, and I also don't push the limits. Like, as much as they offer to say, if you need help, come talk to me, I like to challenge myself, man. I've got a lot of faith in my own team, because, and I'll give you the most straight, honest answer, Rob. We were given a very generous sponsorship through Future Exotics. I could have taken that money and gone to a team over there and bought a ride in the team and told them I wanted them to paint the bike in Future Exotics and race one of their bikes.
Yes.
But that didn't give me the same challenge and the same pleasure in building a bike in another country, halfway across the world, putting it in a box, getting South African people around you that are all motorcycling enthusiasts, all have their own businesses, and go and show these people, put South Africa on the map and go and put us on the map in what we're doing. And that goes back to, I have to trust. Go back to a pit stop. I come into a pit lane. I can't ask Saki if he's tightening the back wheel.
Yes.
While he's tightening the wheel, I've got Jim putting fuel in. If Jim messes with fuel and this thing bursts into flames, I've got Matthew, or sometimes my dad or Augustine, they standing there as the fireman. He's got our life in his hands. I can't question them. You got to work with the people you trust. When Martinez comes in, and we had a small little thing with a bike where on the back wheel there was something that he picked up on. First thing he did is he came, he said to me, AJ, I found this problem. We fixed it. Don't worry. Let's go and ride. I don't even question them. Question them, you wouldn't be there. So I'm very grateful and very into our own team and our own development and building our own bike, because it gives everyone the opportunity to show what they're capable of,
Yes. Sounds like you got a lacquer version of Martinez, because when he worked for me, he just used to murder me across the head and tell me to go faster. Like, he's so nice to you. I just don't know what else is wrong.
Secret recipe to Martinez it's called clip drift.
I think I did plenty of that as well. I don't know what's going on here. MD rocks. Yeah, I agree. MD is 1000% focused and great to talk to when he is ready to talk. So I just want to give my phone here to my useless technician here, who's bigger than Martinez. You know how big Martinez is. This guy's bigger than Martinez, but I still more him. We ordered Uber Eats pizza, and this guy's gone missing, and it's all on my phone. So these folks must be starving. Just try and phone the restaurant. They say it's being delivered.
Do your thing.
Cool. Right, mate, do your thing. I've literally, actually, now that we're talking about it, picture this. a British version of Martinez. That's literally what my technical guy is, and
Has he got shoes on?
yeah, he does. Okay, so that's maybe the one difference then. There's a question here from Greg Wellington. Did Carl Cox throw a party on the island?
I think there was. He normally does the closing ceremony, closing party. So after the senior race, they have a bit of a closing party, like a celebration and a fireworks display. And Carl Cox comes in, and I promise you, Rob, what a cool guy. What a look! I've never been to one of his gigs or anything, but if you just see him in the paddock, he's there and he's mingling with the people. He's not hidden away because he's Carl Cox. And that's back to the spirit of road racing. He's in the holding bay, he's on the grid, and he's just there with it, and the vibe. Everybody, when you go to the TT, they always talk about there's a heavy presence of stress.
Yes.
And you need the likes of your Carl Cox and Keanu Reeves was there. You need the guys they bring a light and they bring happiness to. And let me tell you, and I know I've raved about it, but that's where our team. Let me tell you, we had the best. The fun, the humor. When it was time to work, the guys put their blood and sweat into it. But we could still sit on the grid and be smiling.
Yes.
I've got to, and you mentioned the TH Racing guys. That is a family. With I race their bike and I do the Northwest, and you got to have that vibe. And when it's time to work, we work, and away from work, we sit and we laugh and we joke, and you need that. You need to be in the right frame of mind.
A comment here from my beautiful mother, who I love more than anything. AJ, I have to mention the real AJ, your young man. He's the most gorgeous boy, always smiling, love him. It's a typical mom comment. Like, Mom, we're trying to talk bikes here. Okay, just leave us alone. You know what I mean? Close the door, Mom. We're trying to talk bikes again. Yeah, but it was. You know what? I loved, again, talking about the social media and stuff. We used some of the pictures that were captured in the digital issue of Motor Rider World. Of you with Dom and AJ, it does have that extra little bit of something to it, that extra little bit of emotion to it, because young AJ is building and starting his own kind of journey into the world of racing and into the world in general, of course. But he's been to the last couple now. Of course, Dom, it has to be mentioned every time. Dom is just, like most wives are, just a superwoman. She was on us every time we needed anything. Someone, I think it was Paul Jacobs from Honda, mentioned earlier, she replies to every single message. She does all the things that you can't do, and it's actually quite a big list if we really dive into it. So, big well done to it, but it must be amazing. It's scary at the same time because you know what you're there to do, but having AJ looking up to you, always smiling, he does just look like a bag of joy, and your beautiful partner with you there. Just, again, it's another sense of that, okay, I can do this.
Rob, it's and every year it just gets bigger and bigger. In the beginning, if you had to ask Dom about a motorbike, she wouldn't know where to start. We now in 2025, and I've said it openly, what was organized this year, from our team dinners to our team clothing to the flights, the visas, our image in the pit, everything that took organizing, Dom, I wouldn't have done it. I get a lot of flack. Brent Herron, and I hope he's listening. I saw his messages the other day. I just haven't had a chance to message back. I put a post on Facebook the other day about, I'm trying to think, something happened with my phone, and I just said, guys, if you can't get hold of me, phone the shop, and it was the biggest mistake I've ever made, because the comments were just, but your phone doesn't work and you don't answer it. And so, Dom really, and she kept running Lacquer Racing, my shop at the same time while we were all at the Isle of Man, because I still had my two guys working there full time, and we still had our customers to look after, and then with my son, it's a tricky thing for me, and the older he gets, the more he understands. And this year's the first year he asked me, he said, Dad, how many times are you going to do this? And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, it's dangerous, but he doesn't want to say it,
Yeah.
You sit and you go, boy, this is what Dad does. It's what I I can't, go and work in Absa Bank tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
But then that's in the 5 minutes that we're busy walking down to the paddock. And then an hour later, he's jumped on a quad bike with one of my mechanics, Jim's son. They literally on the opposite side of the island. And I came around and I can tell you, I've got a video of it because they sent it to me. But I remember seeing him. It's on the approach to Billard Bridge. There's a gate. Okay. I come through there. I just clipped 6 gear on the exit. It's flat. It's really flat. And I've got he had an orange Future Exotics hoodie on, like he's hanging half in the track, busy throwing his hands like mad. So when I see that, you sort of, it ignites that fire that, and a funny story just to share, on the way home, Dom and AJ were on a separate flight to us, with the way they flew. And when they landed in Manchester, they're busy building at the airport. So you have to transfer on buses, and somehow Dom and AJ got lost in the airport and they didn't go through immigration. They ended up at this door, and this door put them in front of the G4S security, and they literally grilled them because they looked like, I don't know what you want to call them, intruders,
Yeah.
So when this was all happening and this lady's asking Dom, where are you going and what you're doing, she has to ask AJ. And the biggest mistake she could have ever done was ask AJ where he's just been. And he literally gave this poor security guard a full debrief that my dad was PT. He missed the podium by 0.1 at the North Hill. He ran out of fuel in the race, and he literally is far down to say that he broke down on motorbikes, So he's that bad about what we're doing, I dropped him off at school this morning because I haven't seen him. I took him to school, and I always walk him to his classroom, and he's walking next to and I hear him tell his friend, "Did you see my dad, yeah?" So he does buzz off it, and it does. For me, it is something that I like to for him to be proud of. But at the same time, it's a psychological war you got to have with yourself. That's just it's part of the game. It is what it is.
It is part of the game, and it is what makes you you. So, and you can see he accepts that and he loves it. So let's keep hoping for the best. Greg Waddington says, tell us about the fuel story, man. So Dom added another thing to her ever-growing CV. She was the biggest CV known to mankind. So tell us about, because I also just all of a sudden I saw this video, brilliantly done by the social media team again, of Dom doing fuel, and I was like, listen, AJ, there's things you ask your wife to do, and there's things you don't ask your wife to do. Like my wife also bends over backwards and does so much for me. She does everything. She's got us set up in the UK with Nova. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. But I don't think I'd ever ask my wife to put on overalls and pour fuel for me.
Yeah, Rob, that was also there was another video that they made as well where we sat with each member in the team and we introduced ourselves, and it was, hi, I'm AJ, and then it goes, hi, I'm Dom, and then as I say, hi, I'm AJ again, Dom goes, hi, I'm Dom, I booked the flights, and then Martinez would sit and go, hi, I'm Martinez, and then it goes back to Dom, hi, I'm Dom, I booked the visas, and you literally you have the whole list, and like you say, Dom fueling the bike, it was a bucket list, if you want to call it tick, Okay,
nice. Okay, well, that's good then. I could see Dom wanting to do that because she must have a big bucket list, because she just doesn't know when to stop, that woman. She must stop now. There's a good question here from Joe Alves, another good racing mate of ours from all over the years. Are tires open at the TT? So it's actually a good question. We know we've spoken to you about tires before, but can you literally run whatever tire you want there and whatever tire you can afford?
Yeah, so tires are open. They have got one or two. The only restriction to your tire basically is the date of manufacturer. Okay, so before you go through scrutineering, you need to give them you actually got to color it in on the sidewall. You got to mark where the date of manufacturer is, and you got to mark the direction. You're not allowed to run a tire backwards. Okay. The limiting factor with the tire, why people sort of stick to one or the other. There were some guys that were running Bridgestones. They were running VO2s. They were running R11s. We actually I was running Metzlers this year, and the odd few can get Dunlops. The problem you have is the rear tire specifically. We actually run a dual compound tire. So they put a hard belt in the middle, and it's got a softer shoulder and softer edges. And because what happens, because of the high speed and because you're upright for so long, the tire tends to come apart and it chunks. Okay. So it's actually the safer option to use what they offer. I buy my tires when I get there. But there is the odd European teams that come in and they have a sponsor where they bring their own tires in, And I mean, I did it the 1 year where Ryan at Auto X helped me with the Michelins, and the reason why I felt safe taking those Michelin tires was because it had it's for a road bike. It's got the steel belt in the middle. So tires are open. They've changed it in the last 2 years now where Super Stock and Super Sport used to run a treaded tire. So like what we would run, your Pirelli SE2s or your there we run Metzlers. Metzler Pirelli sort of run under the same banner there. So it was you either run a Metzler or you run a Dunlop. And then when you ride the Superbike and the Senior, you could run full slicks. They've now allowed slicks to go across the board, but you still have the option of you can run a treaded tire, but there is an availability for the slicks. And I queried it myself, and it was just an interesting fact. And the reason why they've allowed it is every year they develop a new tire, your Metzlers and your Dunlops. And for them to develop a tire with tread marks in it, with cuts, they would then have to get it homologated, pay the money, and get lawyers involved. And it's a process to have this new design approved. If they run a mold of a slick, they use the same mold over and over. They just change the rubber, or they change the construction and the build of the tire. So that's allowed you to have continuous development in the tires. So we ride with different tires every year, but they look the same.
But now, answer me this question: that Metzler that you go pay for, or the Dunlop or whatever, is that the exact Dunlop or Metzler that Todd and Michael Dunlop get? Are you getting that exact same tire, or do you think there is this thing that's been in every single racing championship? I'm running the same tires as you.
You'll always have that gray area, and you'll never know. You'll never know. Like this year, what happened? We had the option on the Metzler side of things. We had the option of an SE1 or SE0, and there were guys that gambled because. So what happened? If you run an SE1, okay, I could get 5 laps out of a tire, okay. If you run a super stock race, it's 4 laps. So it'd be 2 laps, pit stop, 2 laps. In the Superbike and the Senior, it's 6 laps. So it'd be 2 laps, pit stop, 2 laps, pit stop, 2 laps. So some guys run with the bigger teams can run a softer tire. Then every pit stop, they change a tire. What I was doing in previous times, budget-based, was I do 4 laps on a tire and then put a fresh tire in for the last 2 laps, and that way I can get a good lap in. But because of the weather this year, they had to shorten races. So we were getting 3-lap races. So now the gamble is, do you go to as SE1 or SE0? And there were guys that gambled the 0, and the 0 would go off. It wouldn't last. Because the other problem you have is we could be sitting on the start line in Douglas, and it's 27 degrees. You then get to the other side of the island to Kirkmichael, and it's 18 degrees. Now you start climbing over the mountain. There's a bit of mist, a bit of fog. It's now dropped to 14 degrees. As the tires start to rip now because of the compound. So you'll always have a set tire. They give you there's an allocation that you can choose from, but when it does come to the senior, anything goes. And a lot of the time, there's riders that will get a tire for the Senior that it is what it is. I've never been in that position to challenge Michael Dunlop for a tire, so I'm not going to go and complain to Pirelli and say I need that because I'm going to beat him. But there's definitely more rear tires. The front tires, it's your normal slicks that we buy, but the rear tire, there is a bit that you can play with.
It's a really nice comment here from Gavin Caldenes. This dude is incredible. Such a passionate chap and proper ambassador for our sport and SA. Kudos to you and your team. Love the insight. AJ is also pretty cool. So that's a nice message. Thanks, Gavin, for.
Thanks, Gavin. That's a good one.
Yeah. There's also a comment here, Johnny Martins. AJ, as a privateer, what costs are you looking at to compete in the TT?
So, if you want to go to the TT, it's gonna depends how you do it. When there's 2 options: you take your own motorbike over, or you go over there and you try and ride in a team. Before you get to the funding side of it, the difficult thing about the TT is to get an entry.
Yeah.
Okay, so not everybody can just entries open. It's freely open to anyone in the world. If when entries open in February, Rob can enter. You can enter.
Yeah.
They then will come back to you and say that your entry's been accepted or not. And then only once you have that can you start trying to find a team or find a solution to get yourself across there. For some guys, what makes it difficult, like in my instance, was I was running in the British Championship and I got invited over by the Isle of Man government who were looking for fresh talent to come across the TT. But there's also a lot of guys that do the Manx Grand Prix, which is later on in the year. And there's people that have been on the podium 3-4 times at the Manx that still don't get that acceptance into the TT. So it's a very, very, very elite or difficult place to get into. Once you get there, if I had to call a straight figure, you're in for R1 million. And that's the reason why I put it in at R1 million is, remember, you're away for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. It's 19 days. You've got to get a bike ship there. You've got to obviously build your bike. It's tires, it's fuel, it's insurance. One of my biggest costs going to the Isle of Man and the Northwest, people, and I'm always open to talk about it because, in previous years when we've had to do these fundraising events that everybody supported, I'm always open to show them where the money goes. When I get to the Northwest 200, I have to take out an insurance policy, okay? Because our level of insurance cover that we have in South Africa isn't enough, and that be it from whatever the cover is or the exchange rate, the rand versus the British pound, the euro. So that on its own is 32,000 rand. So when I get to sign on, and it's funny because he stands there with his card machine and you can't sign on until he swipes your card. So I pay him 32 grand there and then. That's my insurance, okay? And you chew it, but at the same time, because the Northwest is a 4-day event. So I literally take 32K and I throw it away for 4 days. But if I need it, it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So when I get across to the Isle of Man, I have to pay the same. Take another one out. So I spend 64,000 rand just on insurance. Okay. But at the same time, it's a difficult pill to swallow. But I know, and this year it happened again. There's a lot of crashes. A lot of stuff gets kept on the quiet and pushed away. But should something happen, okay, if there was an incident and I had to be, by the time they pick me up on the track and they assess me and I'm alive and I can, they can help me, they'll put me in their helicopter. I'm either going to go to Noble's Hospital, which is on the island. I'll be there as soon as possible, or they fly. If it's crucial, they'll fly you straight to Liverpool.
Yes.
Okay. In the time that I've got to Liverpool and they're doing whatever they need to do, Dom, AJ will be accounted for. They will be collected. They'll be put in a helicopter. They'll be flown across there. They'll be put in a hospital, in a hotel for however long they need to be there. And they look after. You know what I mean? So their level of care and the way they do it is very, very, it's an area that needs to be discussed, but it's a touchy area for people, and should the worst happen, I need to be able to have my body flown back to South Africa.
Sure.
So that's a very important area that you have to go. So your insurance is one, your license isn't expensive. You buy a license when you get there. And then it's your running cost. We use, if I had to break it down off the top of my head, we're limited to 24 liters in a tank of fuel. So every 2 laps, you're using 24 liters of fuel. Okay. Petrol this year, I ran normal pump gas. I don't run race fuel. Race fuel is £5 a litre.
Yes.
I was paying £1.30 a litre for fuel. Yeah. Your tires, it's similar to what we pay here for tires in South Africa. But you'll go through, we get 5 laps out of a rear. The fronts, you can push them on a little bit more. But like in the races, you'll start on new rubber. And then remember, like your team need to eat. So it's all good and well having all these guys around. They need to be accounted for. They got to have breakfast, they got to have lunch. I mean, Martinez eats for 4 people.
Yes.
So
itself.
You have to account for all of that, and it's transport on the island. I had to get a van so I can run the guys up and down. So for me, and that was why when people talk about me getting Future Exotics on board and what the world's lifted off my shoulders, the previous 2 years, that's something I've had to try and carry and try and make happen. and accommodate them, And this year they walked in the door and they saw that the business module that we have, and they made it happen for us. And for me, I'm very grateful for that.
So let's move on to the Super Twins and the 600 side with TH Racing. Willis Marshall, first of all, wants to know where's his cigarettes, and the second thing he wants to know is are you looking forward to running the RS Aprilia 660 next year? So there's already an exclusive being put out. AJ Fenter signing a factory Aprilia deal in the Super Twins next year.
Yeah, so the TH guys, let's go back to the Northwest 200. We got there. Last year was my first year. We went there, and I've ridden for TH Racing. I think this is my third year riding for them. And they were part of Wilson Craig in the beginning, and then they went their own separate ways. And Willis and Trevor put together TH Racing. And let me tell you something, Rob. It's not often you come across established team bosses that have run the likes of Joey Dunlop, Robert Dunlop. They've run some high-profile riders. Yeah. To be as humble and as passionate as what these guys are, And before we get on to this year, where I was seated on the Super Twin, so that for me was already something special. I've never been seated, and I was up with a TV crew. We were joking. We were the heavies on the grid. They, at any given time, they would come to you and they say, AJ, I don't care how fast you go. There's no pressure. Just go and enjoy yourself. Just go. We've got good motorbikes. We know the bikes are good. You enjoying it. The team's enjoying it. I don't care where you finish. And you, in any race team, if you look at the pressure, and you'll see it in MotoGP, every time your job's on the line, So these guys so they lured me in to do the Northwest last year and say it's a good test for the TT, which they were 100% correct. Yes. I wish I'd done the Northwest a lot earlier, but because I'm away for so long, it makes it difficult. Yeah. Because I was battling with a big bike last year, I thought, before I stop racing, let's go and do this Northwest 200 and get it done with. And I got there last year and we walked away with the fastest newcomer award, or the best newcomer award. So that then lit the fuse to go back again this year. Trev and Willis, they took it upon themselves and bought a brand new CBR 600. There was no wrong with the bike we rode last year, but they bought a brand new 600. So we got to the Northwest this year and we put our heads down, and we had to put a lot of work and time into getting the 600 to work. But I jumped on that Super Twin, and in race 2, I found myself fighting for a podium. And I promise you, I put everything I could. I didn't try and take him out, but we did happen to run on the grass twice on the last lap because the opportunity was there, And I missed by 0.1 of a second. And the cool thing about that was we didn't go there expecting to get this podium, and the team didn't go there to expect this podium. And for me, arriving there and being in such a good environment, and the amount that these guys are putting in, to reward them with these good results, it's cool because they put in their money, They allow me, Paul Jacobs, I'm Honda South Africa, they backed me on the CBR 600 for TH Racing, and Master Power. These are guys, they're still my personal sponsors that always carried in, that were involved with the TH Racing. These are guys that's still in there and they push it, and Willis and them allow us to do it. So that then obviously moved across to the TT, and last year's TT race, the weather messed us around and that, but we ended up being seated on the twin. So I went off at number 16. And the first twin race, I must refresh my mind here. The first twin race, we went to K. The second twin race, we had a slight issue with the bike, and the problem we have with these super twins is we're basically taking what a super twin is. It's a Kawasaki ER6. Yes. So it's basically the Ferrari of a Checker 6060 bike.
Yeah.
Still a delivery bike. These guys then put everything. They build them superbike chassis, superbike wheels. Let's say an ER6 makes 60 horsepower. This thing will make 110 horsepower.
Yes. Yeah.
So you got to carry that thing. And when we started race 2, I was back. I could see the bike was running a little bit hot, and I was unsure. And eventually, it had enough, And I think this is a 2011 ER6. So no fault to the team, no fault to anybody. It's just we've had 4 or 3 very, very good, strong years on with this team and faultless laps, and we had a mechanical, you know. So unfortunately, we had a bit of bad luck on the twin at the TT, and then the 600, same thing. The 600 we had a good first race. I came into the pit stop. I was 18th, I think I got up to, and the craziest, silliest thing happened where when you come in and you put fuel, when you fill the Gaza, it's got a shuttle valve. Okay. So we came in, relaxed, talking, guys, how are we doing? Trying to pump fuel. And Lee, one of the mechanics, looked down and said, guys, I'm pumping air. It's not pumping. And he looked up and the valve was still closed. So we lost a couple of seconds, you know. Yeah. And the reality for me, it happens.
Yes.
We've had so many good pit stops. Shit happens. And I know I'm swearing. It happens. But we had a good ride. And then with this new bike, we were playing with the fueling and trying to understand it. The problem you have is you revert back now to, on the 600 we run, I think it's 22 liters. But I mean, you've got to squeeze fuel in that bike. You literally got to brim it. So that, and Davey Todd's bike was the same, the Padgett's bike, that when you come onto the start line, they start to cut out. You're running out of fuel. Come back with 300 mils. When we were at the Northwest, I got into a good race. And because of the nature of the track and the long straights, the bike was cutting out. And what had actually happened was it was a bit lean. So it was running out of fuel. So we added points of fuel and made the map richer. But at the TT, you're not on the throttle as much as you're at the Northwest. And we didn't check the map. So now we're using the same amount of fuel at the TT as what we were at the Northwest. Came race 2. So the 600 race in the first time, we got away with it because it was a shortened race. In race 2, I put the hammer down, pushing. We had a horrendous headwind up the mountain, it was that bad that I was chatting with David Johnson, where we normally pull 6 gear up the mountain mile. He could hold his bike in 5th gear because the wind was too strong. We're using more fuel. And I came out of the Craig and the bike just started to cut out. And I thought, got problems here. So I tried as long as I could to freewheel. I put every trick in the book, pull the clutch in. I even turned and I hit the starter motor button to try and see if I could just
turn it a bit
into the nook. And as you come onto the start line, you come up, there's a slight uphill. And if all I wanted to do was just cross the uphill, and I promise you, Rob, it's an 800-meter sprint, I would have jumped off that bike and pushed it, you know. And because I got stuck in the nook, the marshal came to me and told me it's too far. To park it, you know. And listen, I think the team were more bummed than me, you know. And I understand their frustration because they put all this time and effort in and travel halfway across the world, and we've got a deal and everybody. But like I said to them, I can miss a brake marker, you know, and run. It's one of them things, you know. The reality for me is I would rather my worst part about my TT trip be that I ran out of fuel than that I tucked the front going into Kirkmichael and I've got 10,000 broken bones. Do you know what I mean? So the good thing with them, it's a team, it's a family, and I've always said to them, you know, for me to race 600s, I don't need to ride for anyone else. I'm happy where I am. We win together, we lose together. So the Aprilia story that he mentioned just now, I don't know what he's talking about.
Okay, it's one of those. Yeah, I have no recollection of that. We won't go there. But he is saying, there's another new 2025 CBR 600 are being collected next week from Jackson Racing. It's for you in 2026, AJ.
I think someone's hacked his Facebook. So there you go. There you can see the kind of people they are.
You can tell straight away.
They said to me before we left the TT, we want to buy another motorbike, and I'm sat there going, guys, why? We have a bike. This bike's good enough. I'm banging my head, but sometimes your passion overcomes it, and you know that's why we're in the happy place we are.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got Alex van der Berger, another racing buddy of ours, who's got his notebook and pen out, AJ. So what does the stock class run in terms of brakes? Is it standard calipers or can you run aftermarket, and also brake pads? Would it be your usual SPS DC or DS?
So you have to run standard calipers, standard brake pump. Basically the super stock rules that we run at home. So you buy a bike off the showroom floor. You could put fairings on it, you could put suspension in it, but your normal cartridges, you don't change the complete fork. You're not allowed a quick changing wheel in the back axle. Now the M1000s come out standard with them, but we're not allowed to use. You can't do a quick change in the Superstock race. So you can run suspension, exhaust, air filter, ECU, and harness. So we run the Motec system. If you're running like you're in the 600 Supersport classes or in the super bike race, you're limited to either you run kit or you run the BSB stock, their controlled ECU from British Superbikes. It's called Medtronic. Because the problem is in the Supersport class, they allow the V2 Ducati, they allow the 750 Suzuki. So what they do is they give you 75% throttle, and they limit your RPM, which is a clever system. So there, but we run standard brakes. We can run braided hoses. Basically, your super stock track bike you run here. In terms of brake pads, it's an interesting question, and I'll tell you why. Is Bikewise were very kind enough to arrange us some SBS brake pads, and we tested both the DS and the DC. I had both of them at the TT, and the problem with the TT, and it sounds mad, is you don't use the brakes. Okay? Right. So when the DCs worked fantastic because they heated up quicker. Sure. So if you do, there could be a piece of road, call it 8 or 9 kilometers long, where you're just getting air over it, so they go cold. And what was happening is when we put the DSs in, which was the fatter pad, the bite was good, but because the pad was cold, you'd get a horrible shudder. Sure. And then you'd come into Ramsey, you could brake, and there's a heavy braking place with shudder, but now it gets heat. You go through Schoolhouse, and then all of a sudden Ramsey happened, you've got good brakes again because they're hot. So nothing wrong with the pads, but the nature of the TT, they don't generate enough heat. So you're better off running your normal DC pad. We just like the DS because they lasted longer, but for TT specifically, the DC pad was perfect.
Okay, that's some really good insight there. I like that, that kind of insight. AJ, Kate, it's been a great chat so far. When it kind of ended off with the plans for the next 2026 and 2027. As you said, you've got a 3-year deal with Future Exotics. What is the plan? What were the lessons learned from this? Going into a TT more prepared, more supported, more everything, what is the next step now with this setup and everything everything that you've learned from this year?
Rob, it's funny, and I knew you were going to ask me this question tonight. And I've actually got a meeting tomorrow with the team, with the sponsors, with everybody, where we're going to regroup now, and we're going to basically a debrief from the TT. And we've spoken briefly, like over the phone, but we're going to have a formal chat around the table and say, right, guys, what is our next step? Because it's a good thing, but a bad thing is we've really had such a good year this year. We the impact was made, the image was good, the team, the social media. So for us to beat that for next year, we can't go back with the same thing. We always got to go back with something new and something to step up the plate and make the image good. But to beat what we had this year is going to be very difficult. We have to have our stuff. So it's hard for me to sit and say, Rob, I'm going to have a 30-meter tent now, and I'm going to have, it's not about that. But we're definitely going to regroup and see how we improve it, try and make it even better for next year. To improve the bike for next year, the bike was good. There's always that opportunity that I can go and buy a superbike. You can go and buy a Alpha Racing 235 horsepower superbike with forks and things like that. But it sounds cool, but you've got to hold on to 235 horsepower.
You'll probably get slower.
I've always had it in my head, and be it a big sponsor, small sponsor, whether I went on my own, if I can't do 130 mile an hour on a stock bike that someone has already, I don't believe a superbike's going to do the same thing.
Yes.
I won't get the full value out of it. So, and that's maybe I'm being stubborn, going the superbike will give me 130 mile an hour because it's 10 k's an hour faster. The reality for me is, if you haven't done 130 mile an hour, you don't make the top 10.
Sure. Yeah.
So in terms of my bike and my team, it's hard to improve on what we have because I don't feel like we hit the full potential.
Sure.
You know, we had a lot of implications that caught us. Possibly we're going to spend a bit more time on the electronics and look for ways to improve, and we're going to look for little, like we did now, where you mentioned, and I'm glad you picked it up, that we ran a different fairing, because that was an aerodynamic thing. You know, there's things we're going to sit and play with now and understand, let's try this or let's try that. And we'll definitely go back with more stuff that we've learned. But I don't feel like we've peaked with what we have now. So next year, and I never, all my TT chats up, everyone goes, what's your fastest lap? I never want to set myself that goal, because the problem with the TT is you got to take what you're given. And sometimes it's clever, you get humbled, you know. I definitely believe this year I wanted to do 128. You know, I definitely. What it has done though is it's doing this to me now, that we're close to 130 mile an hour. If I do 130 mile an hour, I'll probably pull in the next lap. I'll probably finish the race. You know, I'll just pull in and have a big body, because I've never known us to be able to do that. So we just got to take it as it comes. Keep working hard. Just, you know, keep pushing the social media. Keep pushing the bike. Training hard. You know, I'm going to get back in the gym. Just a funny note. We were the one night when I was talking about the yellow flags over the mountain, and I was on a good lap. I did a good sector 1, good sector 2. Got to the mountain section and I rolled off because we were under yellow flags. I got back to the pits. I picked my phone up and I had a WhatsApp message from Johnny Kricher.
Yeah.
Please tell me you didn't get tired. So he thought that I'd rolled off halfway around the lap to give me stick, you know, on my fitness, because Johnny had put in from February till the build-up. I was in the gym, absolutely hammering my fitness, you know. So all of that, you know, I learned a few things now with my training this year. We're definitely going to go back with a new package next year, and fingers crossed, we make another step forward.
Let me tell you, AJ, this is no disrespect to you, your dad, Martinez, or anyone, but I think just when you plug that bike into the computer, just give it to Dom. Just let Dom. Let Dom do whatever she does, and you will go 100. You'll probably do 140 mile an hour.
I think after tomorrow's meeting, I think Dom will be able to tell us what we're doing for next year.
You'll make sure you take her with you, because she's going to be able to answer more questions than you are. There's no doubt about that. AJ, it's been fantastic. It's always fantastic to hear the insight, and you really do open yourself up, which is always great. You've always been that kind of personality, whether it's at the track or on a live chat like this. You've always been that open book personality, which is great. From the outside, as you could see from all the comments, a lot of people just praising, supporting. As you said, that you know that it goes a long way knowing that you've got that. It really does make the biggest of difference. And I think with the social media presence and the exposure that, you know, we've been lucky enough, Greg Maloney's done, and we've all kind of backed you and been in your corner. It's been exposed more. As you said, you had more people taking note and seeing it. And all we can hope is that this exercise just gets bigger and bigger, and future exotics get, you know, what they deserve in putting their money and their faith behind you and the package. And you certainly did reward them already this year. I do think there's bigger and better things to come, especially now after you've had a first TT, knowing, you know, what to expect with having more support and stuff. So brilliant job for the TH Racing guys that are online as well. Big thank you to them for the support and looking after our man Paul Jacobs from Honda. Amazing human being, AJ. Proud of you, boy. You know, Honda South Africa have always supported. To everyone, Gary van der Berg, Lakachum, Gary, miss you guys. You know, it's great to catch up like this, because also like you, I get to see and hear names and interact with people that I haven't seen in a long time. So again, thank you so much, and a big well done to you, Martinez, Saki, the team, your dad, Dom, baby AJ, just everyone involved. It really is fantastic, and very super proud of what you guys are doing.
No, that's awesome, Rob. Thank you very much. And two other things. We're definitely going to go back to the Northwest, because on one side, I'm getting Martina. I've got all these guys breaking me in half because I didn't do 128 mile an hour. That's the South African airtime, you know. And then I'm getting international WhatsApps that we missed a podium by 0.1 of a second. Yeah. So there's definitely unfinished business in both areas that we need to pursue, you know. But if there's just one thing I can encourage, you know, and I saw it this year through the social media, Rob, the amount of South Africans and the kids, and I promise you, it was so cool to see these kids sitting on the bikes and taking photos, and we give them stickers, and the South African people here are starting to see what's happening at the TT.
Yes.
And while we over there, these 2 years, try and come. I know it's expensive and it's a journey, but if I didn't do the TT, I'd probably still go watch it.
Sure.
And just the fact that, forget they didn't know me, I would still tell you to go watch the TT. Absolutely. But because we're there, try and come over. And if you can come over, I'll take you places to watch. I'll show you. You'll find our awning. Come have a cup of tea. We'll make you as welcome as possible. But come share the experience, because I promise you, it's something you've never. We see some things in this country, but that's something you've never seen, So if I can put that seed, and if they need any help or guidance, phone Dom. She'll tell you where, what, and what you need to do. She's going to kill me for that. But genuine, if they need any help, we'll help where we can. And then just lastly, once again, thank you to Motor Rider World, to you, to Sean, to Greg, Future Exotics, their social media and their presence, and then the TH Racing guys. Paul Jacobs, you mentioned Paul from Honda, and Master Power, all the guys, Truvine, Howie and them that backed me with the ZX10 Cup. All the guys that have always helped me are still there in the background, and they never chase the credit for it. But there's a lot of people that help us make this happen, and that's why I'm always willing to just share what we can. Thank you to everyone.
It's awesome. My brother's got a good question here. They need to have 110 kilo plus rider class for the TT. Asking for I tell you guys all the time, you're missing the boat. You're training, you're leaning, you're cutting weight. You need to add weight. Traction. This is traction. Yeah, this is traction.
It keeps the front wheel down.
Exactly. Well done to Sean, my brother, for as I said, a lot of people still think it's me doing all the Motor Rider World posts, and that it's not. It's my brother. He stays up to date with every single South African rider, not just you, KJ Monyanyana, Lindemann in the UK. I don't have time to keep up with all this, and my brother does it all. Greg Maloney for everything he did over there, and then again to each and everyone who's stayed with us now. I know it's 20 to 9 here, which means it's 20 to 10 there in SA. So for everybody for tuning in and thanking and listening to us for an hour and 40 minutes, it's brilliant.
Perfect, Rob. Yeah, thank you. I've got an airport run at 4 o'clock. I can't forget. I've been reminded. Yeah, thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, my bud, and love to the family, and we'll hope to chat to you soon. And for those wanting more TT and MotoGP, remember, tomorrow night live from 8 p.m. SA time, I've got Greg Maloney, the voice of choice, and we're going to talk Silverstone MotoGP experience, and then all the insight there from Greg from the TT. Dominic, thanks, Rob. You're the most effective man. Okay, I won't even go there. Yes. Yes. Thank you, guys. Love you lots, and thank you to everyone for all the support. Cheers.
Thank you.